1. We are going live, and there it is. Alrighty. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me pop out the chat real quick so I can get a good look at everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Saturday now, 9 o'clock in the morning, June 29th, 2024. We're still looking at a very volatile situation out there with not only Tropical Storm Beryl, but our feature just upstream of that. It looks like we are continuing to up the development probabilities for that system out there in the eastern Atlantic just to the immediate east of 30 west longitude out there deep in the MDR, the greater Atlantic waters, with a 20-60 split in terms of our formation chances. 48 hours, 20% chance. We're starting to see that begin to climb. And then over the next 7 days, a 60% chance. And to tell you the truth, I think this one, between these two features here, are going to be the wild card. If this ends up taking the name of Chris, we're going to have to pay close attention to it very much so, because what Beryl ends up doing, especially if it does continue to track off towards the west-northwest, generally like this, it's going to help to modify the pattern in its wake. We're going to clear a little bit of whatever could possibly be shearing systems apart in the central and western Caribbean. It'll have a role on what our anticyclone over the southeast and mid-Atlantic states does over the United States, as well as whatever kind of tut or trough activity is occurring over the western and central portions of the Atlantic. A fairly potent system moving through is going to have its own micro to mesoscale influence on the atmosphere. So this one back here, we're definitely going to have to pay close attention to it. Models are very finicky on it. I can't wait, to tell you the truth, for it to get an invest designation. We need it to consolidate just a little bit more until we can slap 96L on it, but I'm very much so looking forward to getting some information on that, because it's another feature that could definitely play a role not only in our lesser and greater Antilles, but potentially the Gulf Coast or Central America. Invest 94L, folks, is still sitting at a 40-40 split. It is now currently positioned over the Yucatan Peninsula, moving across Belize, the easternmost extent of the Yucatan, expected to move into the BOC, the Bac, Bay of Campeche, over the next 12 to 18 hours, where it could try to deepen as Alberto did a couple weeks back at this point, before moving further inland into Mexico and becoming nothing more than a remnant system. And then finally, the main event, we've had an intermediate advisory come out on Tropical Storm Beryl, definitely strengthening. We met last night around 8 to 9 o'clock p.m., and we were sitting at a 35-mile-an-hour tropical depression, and we're up to a 60-mile-an-hour tropical storm. Forward progress is still west at 21 miles an hour. We do need to see it slow down. If we do want this thing, well, obviously we don't, but you guys are picking up what I'm putting down. If this wanted to intensify beyond what we're already setting in the forecast here, we would need to drop this down a couple mile an hour. We would need to see it more at 15 to 17 west-northwest mile an hour as opposed to 21 miles an hour. It was kind of like the epitome I gave you guys a while ago, to where if I'm holding my cup of coffee and steadily walking, it's a lot easier to balance, whereas if I'm trying to run, you're going to see a lot of spillage coming out of my cup here. So that's kind of the same principle with these vertically stacked systems. The faster the low levels are moving, the harder it is for that vertical motion and that vertical extent to stay fully imbalanced and barotropic with itself. So the faster it's moving down at the surface, it's going to have a harder time maintaining that vertical velocity, and it's going to be tilted. It's going to look weird. So we'll have to pay attention to that, but you can see that tonight, at some point in time, you can see 2 a.m. Sunday morning, we're looking at Hurricane Beryl. So National Hurricane Center is on board with this thing. Continue to intensify over the next 12 hours. We'll have to see what it does for the rest of the morning and into the afternoon, see if the satellite imagery gets a little bit more impressive. It is looking fairly symmetrical. There are some folks out there still speculating that it looks sheared. I don't think it looks sheared. I think it more or less looks like it's taken on just a little bit of that dry air up to the north. It looks like it finally wrapped itself around as it tried to place that low-level cyclone underneath its mid- and upper-level circulation. It looked like as the cloud bands tried to wrap around the east side of it, as it was doing so, notice the motion in my hands here, it pulled in a little bit of that dry, dusty air from up north. So now we're going to see over the next 6 to 8 hours is going to be pivotal. If it does start to fire up winds and does start to fire up more thunderstorm activity, then it is going to continue to deepen. The timetable is still very much so the same. We're looking at Barbados seeing the worst of the impacts starting around 2, probably between the 4 to 6 a.m. window like we discussed last night. Barbados is looking at the strongest impacts, and then just beyond that, around maybe 10 to noon in the afternoon out there, AST, is when the Lesser Antilles are really going to see it before it finally kicks off towards the westier location and continues on. still struggling. We are still struggling, guys. The models are not getting any better. We are starting to see some general consensus in our hurricane models. We're starting to notice that the hurricane models are pulling it just to the immediate north of Jamaica, possibly right into Haiti, Hispaniola, and then skirting the coastline of Cuba. So the hurricane models, the HAFS A and B, the H-WRF, the H-MON, all are in very good agreement that we're going to see something maybe in the whereabouts of this. The HAFS A model drops it very quickly and starts to weaken it, and that's when we see it start driving off towards the west, west-southwest. What I want us to really pay attention to, though, is if our hurricane models, especially once we finally get some recon data into it, if we start to see this hold its intensity like National Hurricane Center is expecting, typically the graveyard, as a lot of folks will mention, is between this point there. We have a lot of land interaction that could possibly go on. Hispaniola is a very, very, very rough island nation, so if it does move further towards the north, it's going to get completely ripped apart from the bottom to the mid-levels of it. If it kind of stays in between, we're still going to get that land interaction. It's going to weaken because we're getting island activity on both sides. But what I really want us to start speculating, the models don't think so. But then again, I don't really trust the models right now. I don't trust them beyond this point in time where the cone is still more of a flat surface or a flat image as opposed to this dotted, weird-looking cone. This doesn't even exist to me personally. I can see this, and I'm very confident in this track here with maybe a subtle wandering back and forth as systems do as it stutters across the islands. Beyond that, it's a struggle, folks, and I'm not going to lie to you, I really don't know. I'm sitting here with my notes everywhere. I've been looking at all this stuff all morning since about 4:30, 5 o'clock. And I just don't know. We're seeing so much wiggling and wobbling. The euro wants to do this, the euro wants to do this, the euro wants to do this, the euro wants to do that. The Canadian model, very huge fluctuations. The Canadian model is putting Florida back on the map. Just like we had talked about yesterday, for some reason, 0Z, looking at possible Chris making a run for Florida. Then at 12 Zulu, something entirely different. Now it's 0Z once again, looking at Chris possibly making a run for Florida. I'll show you that later on. But the key takeaway here, guys, is the graveyard is typically right in through here where our 850 to 700 millibar winds out of the east are usually not very favorable. We have a lot of rough terrain up here, so what happens after this point is going to be very interesting because some of the models don't think it will survive, but I really do believe, based on what the hurricane models particularly are doing, we really need to evaluate whether or not if it does survive the trek through the eastern and central Caribbean, if we start to see re-intensification beyond that point. And again, we're not out of the woods. No one is out of the woods yet. Same general time frame, though. We have seen a bit of an increase in our overall wind intensity forecast, though, which is, sadly, I hate to say it, it's very concerning, but we kind of saw it coming with the way it's behaving on satellite imagery right now. It doesn't look like it's going to suddenly just fall apart or stop intensifying. So if you look, this is where we're looking just to the immediate east-southeast of Barbados. We're looking at 100-mile-an-hour maximum sustained winds according to the latest advisory at 5 o'clock. Not the advisory, but the track advisory, the track issuance, I should say, gusting beyond major hurricane strength. Then if you look, as we get through the Lesser Antilles, the Windward Islands, we're sitting just under maximum sustained winds of a major hurricane, 110 miles an hour, wind gusts of 130 miles an hour. So you really need to be bracing yourselves out there. You really do. Martinique, St. Lucia, you really need to be watching closely. Barbados even, because this is going to be an intensifying feature. Based on this current track, these are my 3 islands that really need to be sheltered in place. Based on the current track, again, it's going to be doing something like this as it comes up. It could possibly do this. It could possibly do this. We just don't know. That's the nature of the beast. We don't operate in straight lines in meteorology. But where we are sitting currently, the strongest winds are going to look like this as it comes through. So Barbados, St. Lucia, and Martinique, just to the immediate north, need to be prepared for just about borderline major hurricane conditions. So, again, you're running out of time. If you look at the timestamp here, this is 2 o'clock in the morning tomorrow morning. So we're getting close to closing time. Today is going to tell us a lot about whether or not this forecast verifies here. If we continue to see it look healthy on satellite imagery, then we have a problem. If it looks like the dry air is not mixing out, if we don't get enough of that convection to refire, even though we're at its minimal point right now, then we might have a chance at keeping this away from major hurricane intensity, but I would honestly speculate at this point in time, looking at 110 mile an hour winds moving through the islands, guys, that's a 4 or 5 mile an hour difference. We're sitting right there. This is once again one of those situations where let's not pay attention to the black and white. Let's take a look at the big picture. This is an intensifying storm with wind gusts easily over major hurricane strength. There will be hurricane warnings issued for this area, so you need to be prepared for anywhere between 75 mile an hour winds all the way up to 130 mile an hour winds, approaching Cat 3, Cat 4 gusts in your strongest wind bands, especially for your guys that are going to be in that eye core, the eye wall itself. So I'm not even going to go beyond that because there is still so much variability. We just don't know. It's rough. It's rough seas ahead. So here's a look at our air mass water vapor imagery, and as you can see, overnight it really did get itself together. But right there, I wish there was a way I could pause it. Is there a way I can pause this loop? I don't think I can. It does not look like it, but you can see as it tried to take on that fully symmetrical look, that bona fide tropical cyclone look, notice that there was dry air penetrated the center right there. You can kind of see it as it continues to scroll through right there. It kind of got in there, knocked down the thunderstorm complexes. Now we have another area of convection firing on what I believe is the eastern side of our low-level circulation. We'll have to see what the west side does now, and kind of just give it a wait and see. This outflow is definitely accelerating, though. You can see really good anticyclonic flow on both sides of it. That's what I'm using to draw with my pink here, the streamlines in it. You can see outflow is definitely increasing, so this system is still breathing regardless. Now we're just going to have to give it another 4 to 6 hours to see if those thunderstorm tops return or, whatever the case may be. But you can see it is definitely, again, some folks are saying it's asymmetrical still. I don't think so. It's got some dry air in there. You can see it. I'll pause the loop here. This is your dry air corridor right there. A little bit of dry air getting in there. So this could possibly play a game or play a role in what happens between there and here, we'll say. That's probably the likely area that it'll cover throughout the day today. But all in all, this is a very healthy-looking storm regardless. I don't know who out there is convinced that this is still asymmetrical. You can clearly see that shrimp-like appendage right here. There's your center somewhere in there. So this thing is fully wrapped up. It has thunderstorms and moisture along all of its axes. Yesterday, it did look like it had a westward and northwestward bias, but now we're fully wrapping around. Go over to the water vapor image, and this is another area of concern. We have a couple of different pieces here that I want to highlight for you guys. So we have the Tut here, and it does look like it's getting ready to pinch off, and the strongest winds are going to remain towards the north. But as it stands right now, this is a sheared environment. There is some shear over the Lesser Antilles, particularly the Leeward Islands. The problem is we have a bit of a tropical wave down here, or some sort of area of organized thunderstorm activity that's only going to give, again, it's going to give that little nudge towards Beryl and keep that dry air at bay. You can see that our dry air is back in through here. There's a lot of moisture being pulled to the north. As this thing gets sheared by the Tut there, that moisture is just going to eventually get pulled into Beryl, and it's going to reinforce the pattern. So we got a couple of different pieces here moving around. And Jose, I see that you keep copy and pasting the same thing in the chat. I'm not going to pay attention to that. I'm not saying that maliciously, but we got to look at the facts first, okay? We got to look at the facts. We got to look at what National Hurricane Center is putting out there. The subject matter experts. That's why I'm not even spitballing what I think. I'm just going off of what they're saying. But as you can see, convection is starting to get going again. It doesn't look like the dry air is doing a whole lot to it. If we had lost all of our thunderstorm activity with it, I would be concerned that this might not be strengthening into a hurricane, but at this point in time, ladies and gentlemen, everyone still wants to pull up the euro. I don't know why. I personally, at this point, I'm ready to say, throw the euro out. I'm done with it. Yes, it had some ensembles indicating strengthening. It had some ensembles back in the day that showed a potential strong hurricane moving through our islands, but at this point, I would throw it out. That's just me. That's the one area that I'm going to personally give to you guys on my stream here is Euro is not doing good with this. It's intensifying, it's strengthening, and the Euro still thinks it's going to be weak and sloppy as it comes towards the Windward Islands, and it just doesn't look like that. Does not look like that. So I don't know what it's thinking. Here's a current look, and in fact, look at the satellite here, guys. Yeah, we're definitely not as robust of convection yesterday when it was fully dynamically wrapped up, but you can see that our convection is definitely starting to get going again. We're getting some colder cloud tops. We are fully immersed in that core of thunderstorm activity. And you can see it. I really don't know why people are still saying it's asymmetrical. You go from there to there, you can see where our system is. It's right in through here. Right in through there. Somewhere is the center for sure, and we're getting thunderstorm activity that's trying to close off. Once again, that dry air did manage to penetrate just a little. So now this is our latest intensity guidance. If you notice, the key takeaway is a number of our models are thinking it is going to crash and burn based on its land interaction in that central Caribbean graveyard. But again, we are still, even the intensity models here are not doing us any favors, because we have models that are all the way down here and the halves B pushing category 5. So, the key takeaway here is here's your median. There's your median. So that's why I'm saying we should probably speculate whether or not it gets through the Caribbean and then starts to either maintain or possibly re-intensify. Because climatologically speaking, even though this is very abnormal here, climatologically speaking, I'm using air quotes, the Western Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico were a little bit more favorable than the Central and Eastern Caribbean. So that's why I'm saying if we want to argue and put climatology on the table, it's going to die as it goes to the Caribbean. It's like, well, yeah, but then we have to reevaluate if there's enough energy for it to possibly maintain or re-intensify into a tropical storm as it tries to move further to the west. This is another thing that a lot of our big names out there in meteorology are starting to highlight, and I'm glad people are doing so because there's been a lot of chit-chat that it's going to be a Mexico system, it's going to be a Central America system, but we're still seeing track guidance slowly trying to nudge this thing towards potentially being a Gulf of Mexico system. Again, we're very far away. Take that with about 10 to 15% confidence right now, but we're still seeing a great consensus here. We have a couple of outliers. We have 1, 2, 3 outliers that take it into Central America, but a large majority of our hurricane models, a large majority of our more globalized models are taking it up towards the Yucatan Channel, maybe even between Cuba and Yucatan Peninsula. We'll have to wait and see. So that's tough. It's a very tough forecast, guys. If you look, we're still only confident till about 70 degrees west longitude. From there, it becomes a bit more chaotic. It's still safe to say, though, that the Cayman Islands and Jamaica need to be making their preparations and getting ahead of the storm as fast as they can right now while it is still out there in the Atlantic. And I agree, Soulful Sawyer, climatology is only going to do us so good when we're looking at an atypical scenario here. That's why, personally, I don't chatter too much because I don't have as much experience as some of our official sources, but I really wish we would stop trying to box ourselves up. Boxing yourself up is dangerous. Had we boxed ourselves up and ignored this feature, we would have a tropical storm sneaking under the radar, and we would be giving people even less lead time than we are. So clearly, and that's, again, me just personally, while mixing a little bit of my professional experience in there, if we're in abnormal and unseasonal conditions, we need to also keep on the table that we could see some outlandish results. And when I say outlandish, I don't mean like a category 5, but what I'm saying like just atypical of what history teaches us. Everybody has been putting down on X, on Instagram, on Twitter, etc., that we've only had 4 to 5 named storms in the last X amount of years, decades in the Caribbean. It's like, well, there's always that 1 in 100th chance that it just so happens to be this point in time that we make history. We're already about to set history. We're about to set a record. This might be the first hurricane since 1933 to form as far west or east as it has in the tropical Atlantic. So if we're already getting ready to set a record, we need to keep our expectations open. We need to keep an open mind in this situation. Now let's get into our latest hurricane models. We're going to start off with the H-Wharf. We're going to get that out of the way because I know a lot of folks tend to distrust the H-Wharf in terms of intensity. We're mainly just going to be looking at the track, okay, guys? Remember, don't pay attention to the millibar number. We're going to be looking at the track. I'm looking at track and different variables around the system. We're not going to pay too heavy of attention to what the intensity does and yada, yada, yada. We're just looking at trends, okay? By the way, please, as a few of you guys have alluded to in the chat, let's get that like button. We got to start nudging it, guys. Please nudge that like button. I need a little help. I need a little muscle. I need a little nudge, and that's you guys right there. We have over 400 people in the chat right now. Let's get those likes up, please. We're going to be probably doing another update later this evening if anything does come up. If we do see hurricane status achieved, we're probably going to be doing another update this evening, so we got to get this information going, get more people in tune with the recurring information updates that we're pumping out of this content or on this channel. So this is our 6Z H-Wharf. 6Z H-Wharf seems very, very reined in, if you ask me. I think this is a realistic outcome. It's more of a ceiling, if you ask me, but it's still a fairly realistic outcome. This system deepening fairly steadily over the next 24 to 36 hours. You can see at the 36-hour mark, we're expecting deepening of about 15 to 16 millibars. I really do see that a potential. Again, we have a little bit of dry air in there. That's going to try to suck down a little bit of our overall thunderstorm activity, the energy in the system. So what Beryl does over the next 3 to 6 hours with that dry air is going to be pivotal to whether or not these forecasts verify, or we see some rapid adjustments in terms of our analysis and our short-term forecast. From there, we continue to deepen down to a Category 2 approaching Category 3 strength as it moves through the Lesser Antilles, the Windward Islands. We are very on track here. It looks more or less like we're going to go right between St. Vincent and the Grenadines and St. Lucia. Barbados is going to take a pretty intense hit on that northern eye wall edge. And then from there, if you notice, the H-Wharf continues to strengthen, finally gets it to weaken some, approaching Hispaniola, Haiti, and going right in between the islands there. And then notice, as it continues to move across, it does weaken some because of the land interaction, but there's like a little nudge there. You guys see that? We're going to have to pay very close attention because there's a little bit of a nudge right there. Like it wants to do, like this H-Wharf wants to do something like this. So we're going to have to pay close attention. We have an anticyclone parked over the southeast United States with a bit of an inverted trough, a sideways almost trough coming through. This could play a role on weakening it, getting some dry air out in front of it. But problem with that is, with that embedded trough that's moving around the backside of it, it's going to distort the pattern, and it might give it a little bit more wiggle room to escape into the Gulf. We'll have to wait and see. Excuse me. If we go over to the HAFS-A model, the HAFS-A, once again, looking fairly representative of what could be taking place, approaching Category 2 strength as it moves through the Lesser Antilles, and then from there, continuing to deepen slowly as we approach Hispaniola and then Jamaica, and you can see the HAFS-A model thinks it is going to fall apart, and that's why it starts to move off towards the west. Now, this makes sense. I think this makes sense. If we do see it really fall apart, lose all of its characteristics, if we see the eye, if there's a visible eye collapse in on itself, we get even more dry air, land interaction, and this does happen. I can see it falling apart and becoming a rainmaker potentially for Belize and Central America, the Yucatan. And then again, like I said, I can't wait until that upstream feature becomes an invest because then we have this sneaking in. And the HAFS-A was not really giving it a big vote of confidence earlier. Now the HAFS-A is definitely picking up on something in its vicinity, strengthening. And I'm telling you, this could be the wild card. This could make things very interesting. If you go back to the H-Wharf also has it deepening. If I come back to the HAFS-A model and go to 0Z, notice the difference. Much weaker in its depiction, and now at 6Z, we're strengthening. So lots of moving pieces, lots of variability. If we go over to our HAFS-B model and I go back to the beginning, HAFS-B, a little bit more realistic once again, although it is expecting rapid intensification as it moves through Barbados, so I don't know. Again, a lot of it is going to be based on timing. A lot of it is going to be a timing thing here, and in terms of whether or not we can get this thing to close itself off and avoid ingesting any more dry air. If we come over to our ocean analysis here and we go to the tropical Atlantic, these are very, very hot waters. Typically, the entirety of the MDR at this point in time is sitting between the 26 and 27 degree temps that you see out here. So we're still not into the hottest waters just yet. If you take a look back at the National Hurricane Center track here, we're at about 46 degrees west longitude, 47 west longitude. We're sitting right over top the 10 degree latitude line. Where did I put my ocean heat chart? Here we go. So we're sitting right in through here. Your 10 degree latitude line is right here. We're sitting at about 27, 28 degrees. So we have only warmer waters out in front of it in favorable environment. Now, I know it doesn't seem like much, but think about it, guys. This is in degrees Charlie, degrees Celsius. So we're going up another 3 to possibly 4 degrees Fahrenheit over the next 36 hours. And obviously, we've seen the ocean heat content. The ocean heat content gets even better in this area, so it's going to have even subsurface energy to tap into. So I really don't want to say that this is the expectation, but this needs to be on the table, or a happy medium. 979 to 980 on some of our models, down to 960 on the others. We could see a blend of this, like a 975 Category 2 approaching Category 3 strength, and I think that's where National Hurricane Center is. It tracks through, continues to intensify, and then moves right in between the islands. Again, very good consistency. Jamaica getting a nice shave on its northeasternmost quadrant there, the northeast parishes. And then look at what the HAFS B does. The HAFS B starts to strengthen it again as it continues towards the west-northwest generally. Towards the west-northwest. We haven't seen that shift towards the west-southwest. We're not seeing it nudge towards the west. This thing is adamant on the HAFS B to continue moving off towards the west-northwest. That track does not move at all. There's no nudge. There's no indication anywhere there. It's continuous same angle. And then back behind it, you can see our hurricane potential second hurricane system moving through the Lesser Antilles. That's another big misnomer here. Regardless of what this thing does in the Caribbean, we couldn't have another strengthening system knocking on your doorstep. So those are the key takeaways, the trends here. We're looking at the trends here, guys. The trend is we could have two systems moving generally in this general direction, this kind of obvious quadrant there. Then it gets a little more tricky. It gets very tricky. I have someone pulling on my internet cord. I'm going to have to put my foot down in case it gets unplugged. All right, so if we look at the European ensembles still do us no favor. As soon as we get past 96 hours, we just fan out completely. We fan out. We can see stuff trying to go over the islands. We can see stuff going down into Nicaragua, Honduras. We are not consolidating yet. We just aren't seeing that. Unfortunately, we're not coming together into a consensus just yet, which is very weird. You take a look at the GEFS, and again, we're seeing the same thing. It's fanning out real bad for 6Z. You go back to 0Z. 0Z is even worse. 0Z, expansive fanning out with a lot of different targets. A lot of different targets, for sure. Look at that. We don't want to pay too much attention to where it's going to go beyond the islands just yet. That is going to be very tricky, and we're probably also seeing a mixing here of that potential next system as well that makes it a little goofier to look at. I have a side-by-side image here of what could possibly influence both of our systems, and you can see a bit of why it is that we're seeing some delineation in our track here. So if you look, on the 4th of July, as we're getting into the 5th of July, the evening of the 4th of July, you can see that the European ensemble here, the control member of the Euro here on our geopotential heights, has a dominant ridge over the southeast, which means it's going to have a much larger reach on our features down there, driving it more towards the west. The GFS, on the other hand, has our stronger ridge out towards the western Conus area and a somewhat amplified trough axis making its way through with likely fronts attached to it that are going to continue off towards the east and southeast. So this could allow it to come a little bit further towards the north. If you fast forward about 3 more days to about July 7th, this is where it gets very, very interesting, because this is when we could have that second possible system coming through, and this is a bit more ominous. So like I said, that one behind it is going to be the wild card. We'll need to see what it does over the next 48 hours. If we get an invest on it, if we can get some data on it, if we can get some more eyes on what this thing could potentially do. If it strengthens, if it falls apart, if the outflow from Beryl destroys it, if the shear builds back in, if the drier gets pulled back in behind Beryl, or if this thing stays together and holds like some of our models, most of our models at this point are thinking, that could get tricky. It could get very tricky. If you look here, this is our overnight European model. We're looking at our 700 millibar geopotential heights. We're looking mainly at the steering current. If you look closely, these are our vertical velocities showing both of our systems here. We have Beryl here, and then we have possible, we'll say 96 back here. And if you track it through, this is where it gets eerie. The Euro doesn't have it holding together. But then again, I don't trust the Euro with intensity. I really don't. The Euro is not doing very good right now as we speak. In fact, I want to say most of its earlier model runs we've already busted if we're going down into the mid-990s and getting into the lower 990s over the next 12 hours. But this is where we have to pay attention, because if you look, there's our signal for whatever 96L does, and if you track it all the way to the end of the loop, that thing is in the Gulf, and it moves up like this. far ways out. This is definitely full speculation land, but even the European model is now on board with what the GFS has been indicating, that Beryl itself may not be able to come up. Beryl itself may actually continue to just barrel through towards the west southwest, or the west northwest. But that second system is going to do things to our pattern. And if that second system develops, it could possibly move a little bit further to the north. And even the European long range is starting to show that. That's your vorticity right there. It's all disorganized. This is July 9th, but that takes our Invest 96, our future potential Invest 96, and drives it up. So we'll need to pay attention to that. You can see on the GFS, the deep layer wind shear is not expected to be too intense for either of our systems here. We're going to be underneath that same anticyclone moving through the pattern. The 6Z GFS brings it into to the Florida coastline. You can see on the 6 Zulu GFS, if we come down here and we go to our 850, well actually we use the 700. The 700 will show our steering flow a little bit better. 700 millibars shows there goes Beryl moving through. Very good consistency with our halves A and halves of A and B, H wharf, etc. There goes potential 96L there, and watch this. So Beryl does get bullied by our ridge here. The GFS is adamant that that system is going to move over Hispaniola towards the Turks and Caicos in the Bahamas, but this iteration of the GFS has something scraping up through the eastern half of Florida. Very weak. Obviously, it doesn't look like it's going to be anything organized, but still, we're seeing trends. We got to watch both of these. It's the trends here, guys. We're not looking at dates, impacts, etc. We're looking at trends. And now, technically speaking, if we come back to the Euro, I'll show you on this chart here. We'll go back to the 0Z and we track it through. Watch that vorticity associated with the other invest. Here he is, or here it is right there. You watch it through. Comes up towards Florida. It gets sheared apart, but it comes up towards Florida, comes up towards the Gulf Coast. And then there's that third wave. That third wave is still out there for some reason. So just lots to watch. We can't answer any long-range questions right now. We've seen so much variability. To put it into perspective, if I showed you the charts at this time yesterday, 0Z, both Beryl and whatever's behind it was doing this on the European model. It was doing this down here, very low latitude. Now, all of a sudden, if we look here, we're going further towards the north, and we're going even further towards the north. So look at that difference. And this is just a 12-hour difference. We have our purple here from yesterday going way down towards the south, and then we have our black here going way up towards the north. So everybody is still on the board to seeing something. That's the problem here. The only locations we can give proper and adequate and accurate warning are going to be the Windward Islands. That's it. Beyond that, there are so many pieces on the table. If we come over to our European ensembles here for our wind shear overall, you can see that, again, moving through the Caribbean, we have fairly favorable ingredients. That lopsided trough here is what's going to potentially move this ridge out of the way and open up a pathway for that next system. So I don't know, guys. It's very much so speculating, but we still have to be paying close attention to both of these systems. If you look, I have this stopped on July 7th. I have this stopped for a reason. I'm not going to move the timestamp. Here's our anticyclone. Here's our anticyclone. Here's that prevailing wind flow around the anticyclone. And if you notice, we have a path of least resistance that could go up like this or like this. So there's your point of contention. I will rewind it just a little bit. I'll rewind it a little bit so I can show you. Right here. This is about when Beryl's coming through. So Beryl, we are getting a bit more confident. We're getting a bit more confident. If you look here, we have an anticyclone. We have the Florida barrier, the Florida shield as it's called, out there with a trough. So this could possibly destroy it and move it up. General thinking is, though, this can continue to move up like this, and I think that's what our hurricane models are predicting at this point as well. That's why it hasn't dipped it towards the south unless it dies off completely. So if it's sudden death out there in the Caribbean, then yeah, it'll probably plunge down towards the west-southwest and move into the East Pac. If this thing can hold on to intensity, it's going to kind of do this, based on what the Euro outlook looks like right now. Then if you fast forward, like I said, that second system coming in from behind is going to be a tricky one. It's going to be the wild card. Because this here, that Florida shield is gone. That shield is back here now. So we are all exposed here in the southeast. And that's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I'm not predicting a landfall. I'm not predicting intense stuff. I'm not predicting a hurricane. I'm not predicting anything beyond what we already see concrete. But looking at the trends in our overall picture, the big picture, we go from not so exposed to wide open. Now the question is, will we have something in the Caribbean after Beryl that could possibly exploit that weakness? The Canadian model, the European model technically do think so. If you come over to the Canadian model, we can track both of these entities through. I'll go ahead and zoom in. We come over to the Canadian model and we go through time. There goes Beryl moving through. Very great consensus with our hurricane models in the GFS. Excellent consistency. There goes our Florida Shield, guys. Take a look. So very good run-to-run consistency and model-to-model consistency with Beryl. This is the wild card. We don't know. Canadian, the Euro, the GFS, our HAFS models, our hurricane, everything wants to develop that. So we need to watch that. We don't know yet. Development is still only at 60%. But notice, the European model and the Canadian model are right in sync, as the GFS, honestly. The GFS is as well, that we could have a bit of a ridge up there protecting us and driving it either into Belize, the Yucatan Peninsula, or possibly allowing it to hike a little bit further towards the north, make a run for Texas, maybe, based on current models. Canadian model, same thing as we saw in the Euro. Look at how we're exposed now. Look at where our ridge is. The ridge is out here. Anticyclone is out here. We are now fully exposed in the southeast, and there you go. So, low confidence, very low confidence. Very low confidence because we're so far out. Look at the timestamp here. This is 234 hours out. This is 9 days from now. So this is going to change. But this is to give you guys a little bit of insight that there is a huge margin of error. We can't box ourselves in. We can't back ourselves into a corner. We can't. There's a lot of variability. And the Canadian model, it shows consistency 0Z to 0Z. If you look, 0Z to 0Z is making sense. We have a wide open channel for something to sneak back up towards the north, but 12 Zulu completely derailed that. 12Z, I don't know what happened here. 12Z, massive difference. You can see a huge difference. And then now 0Z, we're back to a Florida solution with that second storm. So massive variability. The only things we know right now that are almost locked in fully is the Windward Islands. Beyond that, it's crazy. You come over to the icon, and the icon is kind of thinking the same thing. We're at 0Z here. And you can see the icon picks our system up and starts to strengthen it. However, the icon moves it a little bit slower. Okay, so this is where it could get interesting. The icon doesn't go as far out, but if you look, we have our dominant ridge up at 500, but there's our trough. There's the trough clearly coming in. This is July 6th. System is strengthening. So as it strengthens, it'll slow down based on the icon. As that trough comes in, that could give it a nudge. Our favorite word here. So the icon doesn't go far enough out, but is showing a very similar pattern reset. So, and the nav gem, it's worth pointing out, I wanted to pull up the nav gem because we were talking Navy last night. The nav gem is our model here at the Navy. The nav gem also is in very good agreement with what the GFS is thinking, particularly at 0Z. NavGem is doing a fantastic job indicating where it is that Beryl could possibly go. And then we have our next system down towards the south that we'll have to pay close attention to. So, definitely lots to watch over the next several days. And that's that, guys. I'm going to go ahead and start getting ready to wrap up the live stream. I'm going to conserve my energy just in case we're back in here tonight talking tropics. Yeah, look at that. We're getting convection again. Pretty decent convection out there. This is way too zoomed in. I got to zoom out. There we go. Yeah, see, we're getting convection firing around that center. So it's trying to close itself off. That is definitely a sign that it is trying to maintain its intensity, if not get back into strengthening despite that dry air, trying to get in there just a little bit. We're increasing southerly outflow. You can see it. We're definitely increasing our southerly outflow, our southeasterly outflow, and that convection's firing back up right around the center. So there you go, right there. We're getting good convective complexes there. So we're going to have to pay close attention over the next 6 to 8 hours what this thing does. It definitely looks like it's trying to mix out that dry air, though. It looks like it is winning the fight against its dry air intrusion. Oh yeah, and look at how it's definitely speeding up in horizontal velocity. Definitely speeding up in terms of horizontal velocity. And when I say horizontal velocity, I mean in terms of its general physics. The faster that low spins at the center, the faster it'll deepen down. So we're seeing that more or less. So now we're back to the waiting game. Do I have any questions? Please make sure to hit that like button. Let's nudge this out to everybody, guys. Water temps are going to continue to go up. So right about here, we're sitting at about 27 to 28 degrees Charlie. More than enough to support cyclogenesis. Out here, where it's expected to move up, we're looking at between 29 and 28 with more OHC. So the OHC goes up. That's another thing we have to take into consideration as well. The surface temps are one thing, but if I switch over to our suite here, and we look at the actual NOAA ocean heat chart, we're wandering towards greater ocean heat content whenever this thing decides to load. Haven't had my breakfast yet, guys. Excuse me. So if it seems like I'm trying to kind of get out of this, not get out of the live stream, I'm sorry. Let me not word it like that. But if it seems like I'm trying to outro quick, it's because I'm kind of hungry. But if you look, we're going to be getting into even greater ocean heat content. And there's a lot of ocean heat content. This has definitely been going up. If you guys remember, we were talking about this. I know I stopped showing this for a little while because we already know the OHC is there, but from just to the east, southeast of Barbados, it's definitely, we're going to be ramping up in terms of our subsurface heat content. The surface temps are going to go up about 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit, but then the ocean heat content is going to amp up because this is 30, 60, so this is 45 degrees longitude right there, right? Am I right? Yeah, we're going in 15-degree increments. This is 45, so we're sitting somewhere right here. Beryl is out here somewhere within where I've just drawn my little plot. As we continue to track it off towards the west-northwest, look at that. We're going to not only tap into hotter sea surface temps, but also hotter ocean energy content. Ocean heat content. So the energy at the top is going to be good. The energy beneath it is going to get better. So it's the ocean heat content here, guys, that I would recommend is probably going to get more favorable for it. And that's when we could see, especially if it starts to get more closed off over the next 6 hours, we could see that rapid intensification. That's why I really don't want us to box ourselves in. There's still people out there who are like, high-end tropical storm. And it's like, National Hurricane Center is thinking it's going to be a hurricane, guys. So just calm down. Hop off the euro for a little bit. The euro is honestly, it's missing the mark. It's not verifying. If I come over here and I show you what the European model is thinking with this thing, look at the difference here. Oh, wait, I forgot I got to click. There we go. Look at the difference here. 1,004 Oh, wait, no. Let me go back. Sorry. Looking at 1,005 millibars. Let's go to now, right now. So it's 12 Zulu is 8 o'clock. Yeah, look at this. The euro is not doing good. The euro is not doing good. It says 1,005 millibars at 15Z. 15Z, to put it into perspective, guys, is 11 o'clock AST, EST. So this is in the future still. The European model is thinking 1,005 millibar tropical storm. And if you come over to our actual hurricane analysis here, we're down to 998 already. So we're already under forecasting the intensity by 6 millibars. And that makes a difference. Look at that convection, guys. Yeah, look at that. Look at those cloud tops right there. Still not as impressive as we saw yesterday. We saw even colder cloud tops yesterday, but now that we're firing right around where that center of circulation is, all that moisture that's going to be firing up from our convection is probably going to seal it back off again. We're going through a little bit of recycling, but it's got great convection right around its center. The center is somewhere right in through here. Right in through there. I really don't think it has a westward bias anymore. I don't think our circulation's still off towards the east. I think it's somewhere underneath our convection now. So it is definitely intensifying, and it's such a bummer that there's still folks out there who are going by the European model. The European model is busting us. The euro doesn't even really have it approaching hurricane. Look at this. Euro has it at 1,002 millibar low moving towards the Lesser Antilles. That's not, no, we gotta hop off the euro, folks. I know it's King Euro, but in this case, I'm actually going for the GFS. I'm actually going for the GFS. I'm going for the Canadian model at this point, and some of our HAFS data. a lot more realistic. So we can crumple up the euro and toss it out. And what that also leads me to suspect, just using my situational awareness on how these systems work, is if the European model is expecting a weak system all the way through, look at that. In fact, I didn't even notice that before. The 0Z Euro doesn't even have it going below 1,000 millibars. What the heck? That's probably why the Euro wants it to crash and burn into Central America. And then there you go, guys. Look at that precipitable water. There's your precipitable water from what's upstream. So we got to pay close attention to that second one. We got to pay close attention to both, obviously, but we got to pay attention to that second one too. This, I don't buy that. The Euro 0Z, what does the 6Z do? Does the 6Z get us a little bit more in line with where we are? Okay, so the 6Z European model kind of brings us back in, but then it shows it weakening as it approaches Barbados. So even then, I don't really recommend using this. Really don't. And that's probably why the Euro is giving it such a hard west turn, because it does not develop it more than just a minimal tropical storm. If we're looking at a hurricane out there in that position, it is definitely going to favor more of a westward push, more of a northerly push as well. The general physics and the reaction that it has on Coriolis because of the conservation of angular momentum. Like I said, guys, the faster it's spinning, the more solid it is, the smaller it is, the faster the vortex is, the greater the angular momentum of the Earth. The rotation of the Earth is going to want to pull it north. So, again, stronger, more north, weaker, westward. That's like the key takeaway here. But thank you all for watching. We're going to jump off the stream. I'll probably see you later tonight. Let's see if this thing re-intensifies, but continues to steadily intensify. We got a little under an hour and a half before our 11 a.m. content or 11 a.m. advisory comes out. 11 a.m. track update will come out as well. We'll get a little bit more model data in. And I think Recon is still slated to go in tomorrow. I don't know why. Maybe they're waiting for it to get closer. But I do believe that they are posturing in Puerto Rico now. The reconnaissance aircraft is out there in Puerto Rico, if I'm not mistaken. I got to double check that in between live streams and get back to you all later this evening if we pop up for a live. That's going to be the determinant, guys. I'm going to tell you right now. If this thing goes hurricane before 8 o'clock tonight, we're going live. That's going to be your cue. If we see a hurricane tonight, then we're going live. We're going to be here on the Weather Center. We're going to talk about it because that means that it is rapidly exceeding expectations and it is getting its act together quickly. And in that case, that's when we can kind of internally, not with the models, but we can internally as forecasters build a bit more confidence on where it's going after the Lesser Antilles. If it gets stronger, we can use the general idea that it's going to continue to move more westward, more northward, so Jamaica, Hispaniola, the Cayman Islands. If it starts to randomly fall apart immediately after the Lesser Antilles and it becomes a wave, then yeah, it's gonna miss you guys. That's not really looking like what's going to happen here, and then we'll have to pay close attention to this. If the Euro is underestimating Beryl already, or Beryl, however you want to pronounce it, I saw somebody in the chat was correcting us. Beryl, Earl. If it's messing up with B here, it's probably messing up with C here. So, thank you all very much. I'm going to go get some breakfast in, get ready to actually start the day. Kind of regain my my sanity after looking at weather for the last, what feels like 4 hours already. And we'll see you guys again very soon. Please make sure you nudge the heck out of that like button, please. Pat's Path Predictor, One Nation Weather, thank you guys tremendously for coming together and getting in the chat with me. I really appreciate it, guys. It's the collaboration that goes a long way. Big shout out to One Nation Weather as well for assisting me with or giving me the alley-oop on the thumbnail. Beautiful thumbnail, definitely. And I definitely would love to touch base with you offline on how to create thumbnails like that, because I know currently I don't have the capability. I'm just not that savvy with it. But regardless, we'll see you later. Like I said, that's going to be the big thing, guys. Please make that a mental note if you want to write it down, if you really want to follow the channel close. If we get a hurricane before this evening, we're going live because we're breaking barriers. We made history. Let's put it that way. Folks, if we get a hurricane before the end of the day today, we have made history. And just under a century worth of history. 1933 was the last time we had a hurricane more or less form up out here. And 2024, we'll have already made it in the history books. So, yeah, we'll see you guys again soon. Please consider hitting subscribe. clicking the like button, nudging the like button. Drop me a comment. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, drop me a line on my private social media, guys, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Lesser Antilles, Barbados, St. Lucia, Martinique, even St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad, Tobago. Don't take your eyes off of this. And we'll keep you posted. We'll see you next time. This is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.